My introduction to Zen and my early training was in upstate New York at Zen Mountain Monastery with Daido Lori Roshi. And after he passed, he had 3 successors, and one of them was asked to become the abbot of the monastery. His name is Konrad Ryushin Marchaj. He was at the monastery for, I think, 25 years or so, but did not stay as the abbot very long, and left to pursue some other kind of paths to awakening and share them with people. And the first talk he gave again at a Zen center was actually with us at Arbor Institute. And perhaps some of you might have been there that evening and was there when he shared a talk with us. But the group that he's working with now, he has some really intriguing practices that he's sharing. And they're often sent out in an email in the morning with just a quick little sentence, a prompt to engage you and give you some point of focus for the day. The current series that he's been doing, he calls Microdosing Sanity. And I've just been really loving having these thoughts in my head during the day. So what I thought I would do today is take a few of them and cut them up and put them in a hat. And thought I was going to have a list of them to share in the chat with the folks online so they could choose for themselves which ones they'd like to work with. And I'd like you to just sit with what's on the slip of paper you have. We'll do another sitting period where you'll work with the prompt. And then at the end, I was hoping we could share in the discussion what you were working with and what it was like to work with. And in the meantime, I'm going to walk around with the hat. And if it's completely doesn't touch you in any way, doesn't intrigue you, when I come back through, you can put it back in the hat and try it. There's only one of each in there. Let's see. So just take a second, read it over a few times, take it in. Notice if you have any immediate assumptions or predictions popping up. Notice any reactions or responses from your wakeful, interactive, more mundane state. I could do that every day. And does everyone have a prompt that they're ready with? So let's just dive right into a full 25-minute sitting period. Actually, let's go shorter because we want discussion time. Good. Let's do 15 minutes. And instead of your breath or instead of your koan or whatever your normal sitting practice is, we're going to allow these to be where we place the focus of our intention for the period. Each time your mind drifts away, you bring it back to your prompt. So you might want to keep it visible to read again if necessary. And let's dive in together. Enough time to sink in a little bit, at least feel it out a bit. The one I had says, follow the unbroken thread of clarity of your mind. And besides following it, just finding it at all was really challenging to me. I mean, especially when I'm in front of a camera or microphone, I get very nervous and very discursive and kind of feel like ping pong balls and hail are just bouncing around inside me. And it was really easy to find a whole menu of really kind of neurotic thoughts that I could follow a sequence of. But to get beneath that, the thing that worked for me was going into somatic sensation. And because I'm so nervous, I could feel my heart, or maybe it was my pulse. But that kept being the re-entry door, was going back to the physical sensation and to feeling my own heart. And that I could feel move through me. I mean, almost like my circulatory system. I could feel that attention to something actual and physical being the path that let the all the other stuff move to the side of the road a little bit. And I found it really difficult. It's so easy for me to follow discursive thoughts or sensory information that takes me out of myself and into the streets or the mountains. But to find something to bring me deeper into me, it is a struggle a lot of the times, even 30-something years in. So going back to the body or the breath or the temperature or something that I can really grab my attention to and stick it to and move with is the only way I found to work with this today, and really a lot of practice in general, because I can get very hypothetical or theoretical, and finding the thread of clarity under all of the ideas and staying with it is like an endurance test to me. I want to keep this one around. I want to put it on in the Zendo to remind myself. I'm hoping others will like to share what they worked with and what it was like. Would anyone either in the room or at home like to share? Seju.
I'll jump in. So the one I got was...
Can people hear? Should I move the owl to the middle? Let's just make sure we can hear everyone.
Okay. So the one I got was feel the movement of the universe through your body, which, you know, is really, really lovely, and also kind of could be kind of like one of those floaty things that you read on Instagram or whatever. But for me, it's very helpful because one of the things that I've really been working with these last few weeks is the whole sort of Zen understanding of the relative and the absolute. And that's kind of kept me from spiraling into like the pit of despair, the slough of despond, and just trying to stay that, just being really feeling that in a very, sitting with that a lot, just how do you go on in this time when the relative can be so overwhelming and so disturbing and so sad, and I can get really sort of distraught about. I mean, every day I read something or I learn of something that gets me really upset. So, and my way of kind of dealing with that is to kind of keep that absolute in mind, and when I sit, to kind of go from the discursive mind to, you know, the birds or the flowing water out in my courtyard, or you know, any number of other things that kind of keep me grounded and remind me that yes, this is true, but so is that. That is true, and so is that. And just that whole philosophical, that whole teaching that both are real and both are important and both are relevant to our experience in our life and to other people, has been really what I've been really holding on to. So I thought this was perfect. Thank you.
Mine says, consider how it is that you know that the thought you are witnessing is your thought. And I'm not the leader tonight, and I'm not as much in front of a microphone or camera, but I still share some of that. It just makes me feel kind of anxious and stressed. It's almost like, I feel like it's kind of like sitting with a koan, that I need to be able to figure this out. How do I figure this out? And so,
I'm sorry, could you read yours again?
oh, consider how it is that you know that the thought you are witnessing is your thought. So, thinking, okay, I'm supposed to sit with this, you know, whatever that means, but figure this out. I mean, how do I do that in a few minutes? And I'm not good at koans, and on with all of that. So I was trying to just calm myself down and let go of that. That was a big, big part of it for me. And that in itself kind of reminded me, okay, so that's part of how you know this is your thought, because it's the same old patterns. It's the same old anxieties and thought processes that I so often have when I'm sitting or in my life. But one thing that did come to me was, you know, in Zen we don't have goals per se, but like a thing that you might be trying to get to is that we know that there's no self, emptiness, that whole thing. And if I can actually experience that rather than just thinking I understand it, then there wouldn't really be thoughts. So the fact that I am thinking tells me they are my thoughts, because there is me still in the relative world. So that's kind of how it was for me.
Thank you.
Okay, mine was notice and acknowledge your suffering at this moment. This is a really good one for me. I always, when suffering comes up, my kind of reflexive thought is, I'm so blessed, I have such little suffering compared to so many people. But, but that's not the end of this, so I have to kind of like say, oh yeah, there's that again, put that aside. And the suffering that I experience, aside from the suffering that we were talking about the present moment, there's a Zen book that quoted, I think it was T.S. Eliot, I'm not even sure, but it was a poem or a play or something where a character was always 6 inches aside from himself. And it's, to me, it's the gap between your real self and your transitory, created, egoic self. And, having tiny glimpses of what it's like to be without that self, the suffering is the energy between what might be possible in our experience of ourselves and our causes and conditions. And then there's the value of suffering that came up for me too. It's like, if we don't suffer, we don't know the world. And then how do we hold suffering in this relative world that's going on at this moment? So it seems like there's a lot of layers to suffering. That's as far as I got.
This afternoon, I shared with a friend what I wanted to be doing today, and I read the list to her, and she just sat and listened to them. And your prompt was the one that really grabbed her out of the pile. And she really quickly burst into tears.
Mm.
And what got her was that she was so accustomed to being expected to go beyond her suffering or to push it away, and felt like she'd been given permission to experience this part of not just herself, but a living being's walking the earth experience. And that she never felt entitled to, that she felt indulgent or weak anytime she noticed her own suffering. And just loved the idea of being encouraged to experience and explore it and ask questions of it and sit with it. I think the one you got was good for a lot of us. Yeah, sure.
Adjust this first. The one I received, or the one I picked, is note the immediate consequences of a particular thought. And there are two types of thought that I was kind of contemplating. One was, I found out last week that I have a respiratory tract infection. I've been dealing with that. And there were some thoughts I was playing with regards to that. But something more immediate happened today, which just as soon as oh, that, and I just immediately wanted to maybe talk about that. So, I have this essay that I've been working on. And every once in a while I'll pull it up and I'll start working on it, playing with it, fiddling with it. And it's about after I lived in Czechoslovakia for a year after the Berlin Wall fell. And I was working there, had a job. The country fell apart when I was there. And so I read this essay about that, living there. Anyway, and I've had the essay for years. And just out of the blue, random, I just pulled it up today. So, okay, let me just read this. And I started reading it, and I had the thought in the opening paragraph, this is clunky.
This is what?
Clunky.
Oh.
And the thought was physical. I like what you said about it was a physical sensation. I was reading the words, and it just felt, it was a bodily sensation of like stumbling. Like, clunky stumbling and tripping. This thought had a physical component to it. So the immediate consequence was, oh, I gotta go back and revise again. So it was something negative. And then just like, who knows how it happened, just out of the blue, I thought, well, I'll begin here. And there's another part. And almost the exact opposite feeling occurred. That, oh, if I began the essay here. And again, bodily sensation. It was like, exuberance. Oh, I'm excited. And then I started working the essay from that new beginning and then made some changes in it. And the sensation of working with words and those kinds of thoughts, for me, is about music. And music is bodily, and so I'm saying the words over and over and over again. So it's about hearing the rhythm in my mouth, hearing the sound of it, and the texture of it as it enters my body. And after I had that, like, here, I can hear. The feeling was, the immediate consequence of the thought was just like exuberance, real excitement. And just like, keep going, work, and just wanting to go and just really getting wrapped up into the music of it and the thrill of it and the energy it had, And I guess what I keep coming back to is just the physicality of the thought. There's a series of thoughts, first negative, like, clunky, just like you're hitting a wall or something. And it just felt like a stumbling of some kind, But then within minutes, almost the exact opposite occurred. There was one of joy and utter exuberance. There was just like wanting to run and the thoughts, they feel musical and physical. I guess that's what came to mind today while working on this essay.
I was so glad you mentioned music, because as soon as you talked about moving to another section to begin, I thought, and I've heard it a few times when you hear a record producer talk about a significant album that he worked on, or the musician's an artist working with this person, and all of these times that the producer will say, well, let's take this verse from this song and make it into the chorus for this other song. And how do you let thoughts jump around in that fluid a way and still have things make sense? And sometimes that fluidity and not attachment to only seeing things one way is what makes the creative process really magical. But also, how many other times do we get stuck in our own thoughts thinking things have to be a certain way and getting stuck with all of the sensations and consequences and repercussions of staying stuck within a thought. And sometimes the freedom is moving out of the thought, and sometimes the freedom is moving the thought around.
Well, this is what happened. Is the guy had been stuck in seeing at the beginning of the essay in a certain way for years. And then just out of the blue, who knows how it happens, you know? Try something new. And within a millisecond almost, the new approach was just like, oh my gosh.
Very cool.
You know.
Thank you.
Kaylee had her hand up a couple times.
Kayla's.
Yeah, sure, I can share. So I tried to choose a random one and I chose, let's see, sense your breath in its continuity with the breath of all breathing beings. And I really enjoyed this exercise. This was fun. The first thing that came to mind was like visualizing like a Planet Earth documentary where they showed the jungles and the trees and like some mist and stuff like that. And so I was thinking about like breathing with the trees and how the trees take in air and, you know, that whole process. So that was neat. And then when we actually sat, it ended up being more of almost how I've heard a loving kindness meditation practice be discussed, in that you kind of start more central and closer to you, and then you work almost concentric rings, maybe like a tree, farther and farther out. And so I was sitting with my own breath at first, and my kitty was sitting next to me. And so I was listening to her breathe and me breathe. So that was neat. And that was kind of a grounding sensation. And then, let's see, it was pretty windy when we were sitting. And so I moved to that, like kind of a breathing of the planet sort of sensation. And it was just really interesting to see where all of the thoughts went. And I had the thought pop up after, well, I was thinking kind of going further out in the rings and things. So I was thinking about, okay, I'm breathing with the people who are in my apartment complex here and my building and all that. And then something a little bit different came up I guess I was following this idea of breathing being life. And so I was thinking, wow, okay, well, what about the last breath? So kind of feeling with critters and people and whoever who are on their last breath. And so then I did the opposite of that. Okay, first breath. And then I also know at least one person who has a lot of breathing issues. So I was thinking, okay, well, breathe with her, and just a lot of different things like that. It was really neat. So I really appreciated this exercise.
Sika.
Yeah. Hey, Seika.
Can you hear me okay?
Very well.
So I also had note the immediate consequences. Oh, there goes my phone. Of a particular thought. and I thought about the current events. And the one in particular is the possible/probable cutting of Medicaid and Medicare, which is catastrophic to millions of people. And this leads to, for me and others, I'm imagining, to a cycle of fear, panic, anxiety, and it just goes around in circles and circles and circles. And at first, it was leading to feelings of like, what am I going to do? And then I thought, well, if I keep doing this circle and circle and circle, this is just going to cause more suffering. So I realized that I just had to let go of it. Otherwise, I was just going to be paralyzed in this misery, in this endless cycle. So I wrote some emails to senators and Congress people, and I've done all I can do. And now it's time to just let go and go back to the breath and go back to just being who I am and what I can do, and just hope for the best, because being in that cycle is just no way to live. It's just not it's not healthy. It's not good for the body. It's not good for the mind. It's not good for my practice. So I think that pretty much sums it up. And I'm just going to keep hoping and keep meditating and keep breathing and keep being. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share?
Okay. Mine was appreciate the scale of yourself in the universe. And I like this one a lot. And I think I was definitely initially kind of considering it from a ordinary mind perspective. And I was like, wait, self, you say? And then recognizing that, most of the time I do experience myself as having a self, even though I have glimpses of something different. So what is the scale of that? Like, if self is just a perception that we have, what is the scale of that perception? I really don't know. And then my brain just kind of went, mm-hmm. And I got a little bit less in my head with this. Felt very koan-like. I felt less like I was trying to figure it out cognitively, and then just like felt really kind of a sense of mild euphoria physically. It's still present. Some energy, some peace. When there were folks out on the street talking, I was thinking about like, oh, okay, they have absolutely no blame. They have no idea that their voices are carrying into my practice, and thinking about how often every day I'm impacting other people in ways that I'm not aware of, and okay, that's just what we're all doing all the time. Appreciate also is the key verb. Like, how do I appreciate the scale of myself in the universe? That also broke my brain a little bit. Like, how can I think I had the thought at one point, can I do that? Is that actually, can I appreciate it? And then my brain stopped again, and it was nice. And I'm also feeling into what are the ramifications of appreciating my scale, the scale of myself in the universe in light of all the, tremendous fear and suffering in the relative collective right now that we're speaking of. Yeah, there's something about when I feel the consequences of a particular thought being like, this is terrible, someone must do something, it's all on me to do something, I need to do something, this is so bad, I need to do something, I need to say something, I need to do something. Then like the scale of myself, when I'm caught in that, the scale of myself, feel like all scale disappears. I feel very fearful, I feel very self-y. And it's paralyzing. And I think, the gift of like feeling into the absolute level, even whatever little bit I'm able to, actually gives some extra, courage, playfulness, possibility, the sense that like even this sense of disproportionate fixedness that I have about whatever is happening in this moment. Yeah, the suffering is real, the fear is real, and that's not everything. That's not the whole story. I can't know the whole story. And there's courage in that. Yeah, I appreciate the exercise.
And just that you use the word appreciate, not ponder or consider
Yeah.
or contemplate. For someone that English was a second language, well, he's from Poland. Every one of these is written so carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just real beauty in his language when he gives talks or just sends out a sentence in the morning. Thank you. Anyone else? Please.
I had the same one Kayla had. Sense your breath in its continuity with the breath of all breathing beings. And my very initial response was, well, that's just really abstract. And what's to, so to speak, wrap my arms around with that? My second thought was, gee, that's unthinkable. That's just unthinkable. And then I realized, well, it says, sense your breath in its continuity with the breath of all breathing beings, which then pulled me into somatic awareness of how am I feeling this in my body, and what is this that is always moving and that is both outside and inside, that is that seems to have two motions, in and out, but I can't tell where one obviously stops and the other begins. So all of those are just impressions and sensations, which I find quite just reassuring somehow and helpful. What I was also mindful of is, and this is not particularly new thought, because actually this practice is something I've done in different ways at different times. And I just found myself going to that place saying, every breath in is something else's breath. And in every breath in, I am literally taking in not just the immediate, but really everything, which is the thought that I can't think. but is somehow real. And then I also was thinking, mindful that, yes, and then and when I breathe out, I'm breathing into everything. And all of that is this thing called life, not one or the other. And it's always dynamic and always moving. I mean, those were just kind of the directions that my mind was going. And when a car went by or a truck went by and there was some sound on the street, I thought, yes. And I'm also inhaling that. And that's an exhalation of other kinds of breathing that go on in this world. And I'm not separate from that either. I mean, just that you can keep, I could keep playing with it, which is not helpful. Because again, it's unthinkable.
15 minutes is what.
Right, well, yeah. It made me think of ancestors. And how, and it did take me to a couple of lines in Genjo Koan, but most significantly, to forget the self is to be verified by all things. To be verified by all things is to drop off the body and mind of the self and the body and mind of others. That image of being verified by all things is, to me, became this inhalation, this exhalation, this absolute interconnectedness and interdependence. And I'm grateful for this breath.
May you have many more.
Thank you. I've been thinking of that too recently.
Sure.
I first had the one that said, choose a thought, the one that you had, and contemplate it. And my first thought was, I am Buddha, which was immediately very pleasant. But then I was like, well, I don't want to have so much control, so let me do a different way. I want to be under his influence and not just choose a thought that I like, or even choose a thought at all. So I had, notice when you are diminishing your capacity to be aware. And it's interesting, I've noticed a lot of us have had like a immediate reaction to the piece of paper, and then there's like a process of maybe letting that go and actually entering into the practice or contemplation. My first one was, well, I don't know, my capacity to be aware is probably still there even if I don't notice it. And then I'm like, all right, that's kind of arrogant, so let's actually do this. And what I noticed was like just thinking about this thing kept bringing up, diminishment of awareness. So as I'm sitting, I just kept kind of noticing a thought arise of, well, how am I relating to this thing? What am I thinking about this prompt? And I'm like, oh, there goes my awareness diminishing. And then to just keep noticing when thoughts would enter became actually a really nice practice of like, I think generally I practice more of noticing that continuous thread of awareness, but this it really tuned my sensitivity to the very beginnings or the earliest I could sense of when thinking or whatever started to kind of diminish the awareness. And after 15 minutes, I felt really, with that practice, it was really quite satisfying to just be open and notice, oh, there's a diminishment. And then as soon as just tuning into the diminishment, kept opening it back up, kept kind of just, it would dissolve as I looked. And so by the end of 15 minutes, it started to feel like a pretty deep meditation. So I think it's a I've heard of practices where you like notice where thoughts come from, or notice where they persist, or notice where they go to when they disappear. And this one kind of felt a little bit more like notice where they're coming from. Like notice when the diminishment starts to happen. And it felt very helpful. So that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. I've got a couple more minutes if anyone else would like to say anything. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Sam Curley, and I'm a friend of Rob, and I'm coming up from Salida, Colorado today, so I'm from down south. And I had reaffirmed today your deliberate choice to study the reality and mystery of your subjective experience and your being. So I was.
Can you read that one more time? There's a lot.
There was a lot to chew on. It was kind of like taking a big bite of something and realizing I can't swallow all this.
You got the best one.
Can you read it one more time?
Reaffirm today your deliberate choice to study the reality and mystery of your subjective experience and your being.
Is that all? I thought you were going to get that one.
So I just held on to reaffirm, and that was what I sort of kept coming back to. And what am I reaffirming? Well, reaffirming. I think the gist of the rest of it was kind of this dharma, this path, this deliberate choice to study mystery and experience. And there was this kind of, I knew this was sitting here in front of me, and so I knew that was the practice was reaffirming this choice. And the somatic experience was really wanting to fall asleep away from that, away from a reaffirming, away from a deliberate choice. And it kind of felt like either to this side or to that side, but to one side or the other, wanting to lean away from a kind of deliberate choice, or kind of to fall into like a luxury or some kind of a indulgence. And the deliberate choice kind of felt and still feels like something to kind of square your shoulders up into and to straighten your spine into. And so that was the practice for me, was to sort of keep returning to it and keep returning to it, even though I kept fading away, just to return back again when it occurred to me to do so. And then to the notion of self, like what is returning to this dedication to practice? What is rededicating itself? And I think there's comfort for me in a sense of a bigger self, of a more expanded crisscross of causes and conditions that is reaffirming itself in me, or that there's some wider net of things reaffirming itself, that it's not just one kind of lone being against all of this subjective experience, that there's a grander being. Yeah.
I was really grabbed by your kind of squaring your shoulders and your spine, and coming back to our practice with dignity is not with our tail down and not with arrogance, but just a really upright presence, just some really I could almost taste it in my mouth when you said those words.
Mhm.
Thank you. So cute.
Thank you. I had the same one. And it's definitely a mouthful.
You just
Took me a
square your
while to
shoulder.
find my way in as well. First, I would like to say just how much I'm enjoying this. It's reminding me of that parable of the six blind men who come across an elephant, and so they all describe the elephant, but from a completely different point of view. And it's feeling like that, like we're all describing something about the nature of reality, but from completely different perspectives that these are entering us into. So thank you, Gakyo. And I have to pull up the thing in front of me because it's so long. It's hard to keep. I'll read it one more time. Reaffirm today your deliberate choice to study the reality and mystery of your subjective experience in your being. I love what was just shared. What came up for me, the first thought as I was sitting was I had just recently had an experience and a reflection of that almost everything in the way that my life is today and the path that I'm on is, I can trace a direct result to my commitment and choice to engage in the study of Zen. So much of my life has unfolded and opened because of that. And I just recently had that appreciation of, just deep gratitude for how this practice and my commitment to it has led to um, such deep connection in the world. So that came to my mind. And then sitting with the reality and mystery, I've recently had a number of experiences of just the mystery of how, as I open into deepening in my practice, how more of that mystery opens up to me. More of reality opens to me. More of my subjective experience opens to me. More of my being opens to me. So I guess what I'll share is that where I landed in practicing with this was seeing the direct connection between the study, the commitment, the affirming to do that, to engage in that, and the direct experience of the reality and mystery and subjective experience of my being, that commitment and the experience are actually intrinsically linked together. And a profound reaffirming for me of the importance of practice and the gifts that it brings to me. So I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Is that everyone? I think we got everybody.